How's it going, Cody?
And it's going good. How you
I'm
doing today?
doing good. Yeah, I'm freaking ready to get back on. I've
Yeah,
been itching. Finally here. It's like the real Christmas is getting back on.
right. Yeah, I those times when you're off and you're hurt and stuff, you chomping at the bit, and it's kind of hard to be patient. But in most cases, you got to be patient. Do what the doctors say.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I'm probably coming back next week. I get a screw taken out of my ankle, so I probably could have waited a few more weeks, but it's everything's healed up. So one of
Yeah,
those.
you gotta get on any practicables before you go interrupt or just
Probably not. I'm gonna go to Fort Worth, and those bulls are. I mean, they're the few good ones, but from what I've been seeing, they're just about practice bulls up there. So
yeah,
they've been, a lot of them are probably old rodeo bulls or calves that guys are taking.
yeah.
So that's it's been pretty cold here too. So it's not like it's kind of hit or miss on whether you're going to be able to go and get on somewhere or it's going to be freaking 15 degrees out. So
A little bit chilly.
yeah. So But man, I've been waiting to have you on for a minute. I think you're probably the most qualified person I've had on. Had a few guys, world finalists, NFR qualifiers, but you've done it both for a good while.
Yeah, it's been a long time since too. My my memory of it all. I'm kind of one of them old guys, so my memory might get. I might be better. I might not be as good as I thought I was.
Heck, you did it. Man, how
Yes,
many
sir.
how many NFRs did you go to?
I went I went 8 times and 9 times to the PBR finals. Nine qualifications. I think I rode 8 times at the PBR, but I qualified 9 times.
Now at that time, because heck, I wasn't even born. Well, I guess when the PBR started, that was when I was born. But how much of that overlap? So when you went over to the PBR, did you still rodeo full time? Like, were you doing both with?
We all did when we started PBR. It was, I mean, it's just the guys that were rodeoing that we all kind of were. It's the same group of guys, so it was. There was no difference in. I mean, you go to PBR, you're riding at the NFR basically every weekend. So riding against the best guys every time. And I honestly think that there's so much stuff happening now that doesn't happen as often as it should in my mind, because I think when you're riding against the best guys, it makes you step up and be better. So I think everybody's spread out now. There's little pods of guys that are great in the PRCA, pods of guys that are great in the PRCA, different little places. And I think it makes you step to the next. It just makes you step up, and when you know you're riding against the best guys every time, and it's pretty. It'd be pretty easy to avoid the. Well, you can't bring. I mean, there's a group of guys going to PBRs that don't rodeo, and there's a group of guys rodeoing that don't go to PBRs, so they're never really uh, up against each other and riding in competition wise against each other. So I think that's a little bit of a disadvantage um, to the guys themselves. But I mean, it's a different world, a little bit different world, just because there's so much stuff going on, so many places you can go and really make good money. So it's good on one hand. It's like a double-edged sword in my
Yeah,
mind.
there's a lot. Heck, bull riding. I mean, especially with the bull teams that they've had now, there's so many freaking places to go, and a lot of places that pay really good. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
shed this, and I think if a guy really wanted to, he could probably go to amateur bull ridings and make close to six figures. A guy that's dominating.
Guys,
Just
guys that ride good. I mean, there is guys out there that are doing that, and they're never really going too far from home. Especially if you live down in Texas, Oklahoma area. There's stuff going on every weekend that pays well. So
yeah, 100%. What was that like? Because now, especially when you talk about PRCA and PBR, and there's some of those guys. There's a few of them that are doing both, like you see Josh Frost doing. But the scheduling conflict, I think, was a bigger issue when it comes to that. What was that like back when you guys first started it, like when the PBR was founded, did they like try to schedule, did you guys try to schedule it to where you could all go to the big rodeos as well?
We did. We made sure, we made sure there was no conflicts conflicts with the biggest rodeos and stuff. And that, there was part of the deal of being on the Bud Light tour back then was you agreed that you weren't going to turn out at a Bud Light and go to a rodeo or something. And so it was that was part of the deal in the beginning, because if we're promising the best bull riders at in the world, then people are paying on that premise, then they need to come see the best guys, and not, the PRCA, the rodeos, there was guys always turning out. Tough might be up one night, and somebody want to come see Tough, and he turned out, so they don't even get to see the guy they came to watch. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of that's kind of how we set it up initially. Now there's just so much stuff going on. There's so many great rodeos that add a lot of money. And then there's so many bull ridings that they have to kind of overlap. So it's one of them deals where guys got to make a choice. And I think Josh Frost, I think he accepted the being on the tour, and kind of had to miss some events. And from what I hear, that Sage Kimsey's headed that direction too. So I don't um I don't know all the ins and outs of the entering part of it, or being a competitor at this level, just because I'm so far removed from that part of the deal. But it's good to watch. I'm a big fan. I love bull riding. I love bull riders. I love guys that love it, and love bucking bulls. And it's
Yeah.
I'm pretty opinionated about things. I think guys need to be honest with themselves about where they're at. There's some guys that are going to the PBRs that probably should be rodeoing for a couple of years and gain some maturity and some confidence and stuff like that. But that's between them and them. I'm not a guy that's sitting here going, trying to tell people how they do it. I got some influence with a few guys, and they ask me, and I give my opinion, but I'm not down on anybody for choosing which way they go.
Yeah, I think, like when I started, I was so far removed from rodeo. I didn't grow up in it. So I was 18. That's one piece of advice I wish I would have had earlier. Because at that time, I didn't like there was nobody that really pointed me in like, hey, take this pass and then go to the PBR. So, I mean, I think I made the first event on tour was in 2017, and I would only been riding bulls for, 4 years at that point.
Yeah.
I really had no business, you know, going and getting on those bulls that consistently. Like I should have developed myself a little bit longer instead of, jumping from one.
Right.
Basically, whenever I got to where I was good enough to compete at one level, I jumped to the next level instead of really learning like, maybe if I
Dominate.
went,
Yeah.
yeah, going if I would have
Make
went to
sure you're
one level,
dominating there. And
dominating.
yeah, and that's the advice I give to all guys that come to my schools. I'm like, hey, just be honest with yourself. Don't You got to challenge yourself, but if you go in over your head right away, then you never really experience having good success, and gaining your confidence, and maturing physically, mentally, and knowing what it's like to be you know a badass where you're at, and feel like you're the top dog when you step to the next level. And I mean, my story is, when I grew up in Arizona, and when I felt like I was the best bull rider in Arizona, I may not have been, but I felt like I was, and so I left and moved to Texas, and went back there and rode bulls back there. So I became a little fish in a big pond again, and so I had to really work hard to catch up, and be. And back then there was jackpots every. I lived down in Lampasas, which is down close to Austin, and Waco in that area, and that you could go to a jackpot every night within probably 100 miles of Lampasas back then. And that, the bulls weren't there wasn't a bunch of juice hogs either. There was a bunch. I mean, it was a drawing contest, and there was some good spinners, but there was also some big old, hard to ride dogs in there that you didn't really want to get. But you kind of that experience, I think, riding those kind of bulls and learning how to track those bulls that were uh, just trying to get you off their back. They really weren't bred to buck type bulls. I think that benefited benefited me. And I see a lot of guys that just practice on little duck spinners, and when you go get, you go to the next level where those bulls are smart enough to step forward,
Yeah.
or maybe they have a little something to them a little bit more, they go backwards a little bit in there. So I think good practice bulls are ones that don't have a set pattern, that are kind of a little bit more difficult to ride, and maybe not more difficult to ride, but just don't have a pattern. They're not patterned. They don't stay. If you watch Josh Frost and Joe when he was riding, the kind of stock they get on, they're not overly athletic, but they have a lot of direction changes and a lot of movement forward. And so I think those guys both really benefited from that. And their dad, Shane's a good friend of mine, and I know he did that on purpose to help those boys learn how to track those bulls and not just ride duck spinners, because there's a lot of guys that can ride duck spinners, but when it comes to direction changes and altercations in the movement and all that stuff, I think they get a little bit overwhelmed, and then you can go to fighting your head, and then when that happens, then you're kind of sunk if you get to a place where you're fighting your head.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think learning how to track bulls is probably one of the best things that, when I first started, old man in Illinois named Ray Cox, he used to actually live with Jim Shoulders back in the day. And he did all the events and stuff, and he kind of took me under the wing. And for about a year, he said, he told me, he's like, I'll help you, but you can't go ride anywhere until I say that you're ready to. And when you
Yeah,
go, and you got to go who I tell you to go with. And
yeah,
that was one of the biggest things. She didn't tell me a whole lot. That kind of, he's real old school. That old school mentality wasn't, he didn't talk about form. He put you on the right bulls to help you feel the right things, because
yeah,
he it
yeah,
was the feelings that were going to transfer once are getting on the road pretty hard and getting on better bulls. And
yeah.
I remember getting on bulls. I mean, heck, you never knew what those suckers were going to do. They would be like a hot air balloon.
Well, and I think it benefits you because you're not trapping them, and you're not, you're holding out to the front end. The shoulders dictate where the bulls go. No matter how athletic a bull is or not, he's got to follow his shoulders. And so, my part of my training is just a stationary barrel and driving straight to the front and stopping up front and hanging out up there and getting used to that being where you get back to, and you do it without hesitation. You get there quick every jump, and when you do that, you're on top of their shoulders, so your foundation below your hips is strong, and then you can handle the structure getting tipped. If your structure gets tipped, you just level it back over the top of the foundation, and if your foundation's on top of their shoulders, it carries you to where they're going. And so I try to really simplify what I teach. I don't free arm movements are the last thing you use to get there. If you're caught up in the free arm deal, I really stray away from free arm movement. Just
Or
free arm control is really important, but being strong with your structure and your core, and being and not hesitating to get back square to the center every jump. And that's where I think, I'm a stationary barrel advocate. I drop barrels are good for timing, but I think if you give your full attention to that, you're giving something away. And
to be honest, I think with the drop barrels, what I found probably the most beneficial out of like the buck rides and stuff is more just like getting into bull riding shape, working on building the muscles in your legs
yeah,
and your core, and not so much the form part of it. It's more, that, like you said, I think the stationary barrel for me has always been the go-to, just because I guess when I always started, Ray always talked to me, and then Gary, I went to his schools quite a bit when I first started, was like staying small. Like, your movements aren't big. Like, sometimes they have to be, but everything's kind of little. And that foundation that you're talking about was like a
yeah,
big part of
yeah,
it. How do you keep weight on your legs?
yeah, yeah. It's to me, there's some terms that I don't use in my schools. I teach maybe the premise of that, but I don't use different, like I don't use set your hips. I don't like that term because it causes guys to push their shoulders away from the bull's shoulders in setting your hips. The only reason you have to set your hips is because you're not lifting on your rope when you move forward and keeping your crotch on your hand. And so I disagree with the straight arm uh, ideology. I disagree with pushing on your rope. Yeah, there's a little bit of give and take in that. But if you don't, lifting on your rope isn't necessarily lifting. It's just pulling your core down and being strong, staying in that position. If you watch Jim Sharp, which in my mind is the greatest to ever have a career, over a span of a career, Jim to me was he did one thing and he did it continually. He did it in a consistent manner. Is got back to the strong place and held out. He didn't do. There was not a whole lot of free arm movement. There was not a whole lot of anything other than just getting to one spot and holding that position. And so I don't. Everybody's going to teach a different way, and some guys are going to pick up on different lingo. And I've really studied hard to figure out what kind of lingo is the most beneficial to everybody as a whole. And then while I'm doing my schools, I'll say something different to one guy because he's 6'2" versus a guy that's 5'5".
Yeah.
There's different lingo that I use to make them understand what I'm trying to accomplish. And bull riding's not cookie cutter. Anybody that tries to teach it cookie cutters missing out on the individuality of every guy.
I was
So,
talking.
but if you think about Owen Washburn compared to Chris Shivers, they're two different builds of guys. Owen 6'1" or 6'2", whatever. Chris was whatever it was, 5'5" or 6", and he was a stout little guy. Owen was lanky. The one thing they did good is they held the front end when they were riding good. They were good at getting to the strong place and stopping. And in my mind, the stop place is forward over the top of if you take wrestling for uh, you know as your if you're going off of anything athletic, you're in a strong position. In wrestling, a lot of when you're wrestling, you get in a strong crunch, kind of a crunch position, and that's your leverage. And so I teach the same thing with my bull riding is lifting on your rope and looking at the bull isn't sitting straight up and down and lifting and looking down your nose. It's pulling your face down and getting in a strong place like you're fixing to engage with somebody wrestling or fist fighting or whatever it is. And so I kind of I just got a little bit different look at it, and I try to, free arm is so important to have that thing under control and not let your hand drop below your hand drops below your elbow. You're giving a lot away in the athletic strong position. This Jim Sharp look pushes your hips under you, that elbow kind of leading with that elbow, driving this shoulder down, leading with that elbow. You're covering up that off shoulder and keeping your hips under you. So my strategy is basically just doing one thing and doing it really well, and that's getting on top of the shoulders in the initial move. In the as the bull's coming up in the front end and pushing with his hind legs. No matter which direction he's going, if you're on his shoulders, you've taken away you've taken away having to get to a turn. You're already letting that bull pull your core. Your structure might get tipped, but if you're what I call the foundation is from your hips down. If your structure gets pulled but your foundation's in the right spot, it's easy to get the structure over the top of the foundation. And
Yeah.
so I've really talked about, like if you're blocking somebody in football and you can get their 1 foot off of the ground, you got them.
Yeah.
If you can but if they got equal weight on their feet and they get their shoulders level back over the top of your hips, then you got a fight on your hands. And so that's where you gotta continually get to that strong spot where you have total control of your physical and your foundation below you is still strong underneath.
Yeah. I as far as like that lingo and stuff, I kind of went through this, and heck, a lot of my career has been, self-taught.
Yeah.
Took stuff from Gary, but in Missouri there wasn't just a ton of, really good bull riders going out there that were helping anybody, and And so I kind of did it all myself. And taking Gary's, I went to the extreme on a lot of stuff, and I did exactly what you were talking about, straight arming and setting the hips, and those were the lingos I kind of learned. And I really struggled not away from my hand, into my hand for almost the entirety of my career. It wasn't until this past year, earlier this year, that I, started figuring out the end of my hand thing, which away from my hand, I guess I always lifted good away from my hand, but in my mind, I was always driving. And
Yeah.
my hand,
You still got to drive, but you got to keep yourself to the rope.
yeah,
And that's the biggest thing. And I don't, hey, everybody's got their way of saying what they say. And if you go back and you watch the only where the straight arm idea came from, this is just my guess. It's not I don't know this for a fact, but it's on a still picture of a bull whose feet are 3.5 feet off the ground and a guy's driving forward. Well, yeah, but how many of those kind of bulls does a guy get on right off in their career? So if you start getting them to do that, then the only place they have to go is backwards, and bulls they're not dropping and kicking hard. So that getting to that, I mean, I don't remember ever seeing a picture of me with my arm straight. Now it's straighter than it was in some pictures,
yeah.
but you take it if you take the wholeness, the full 8 seconds of the ride, there's not you're not pushing on your rope. Okay, you're riding the momentum of what the bull's doing, and so 95% of the bulls in the world don't kick the first jump. So if you're not lifting on your rope when you leave the chute, you're going to get set back to your pockets, and then you're going to be chasing from the start. So you got to have them. I teach to get your hips under you a little bit like a bareback rider almost, so that your foundation, and then you mash with your legs and push down into that bull. Now your foundation is strong, and you leave the chute in a neutral position where you got some place to move. Because if you first thing you do drive forward, there's only one place for you to go, and unless you're on riding solo or something like that, they don't kick over their heads the first jump. And
Well,
and so that's just kind of my way of looking at it and thinking about it.
I know for me, like what I found was, and actually the Brazilians were the ones that were helping me with it, because all the Americans, I mean, I guess it was just the way it was communicated. And that's the thing about teaching. For a long time, I thought, man, I'd like to teach it, but there's so, like you were saying, I mean, there's so many different people, and people feel things differently. And so, like, you have to communicate something in a way that somebody can feel it or find that feeling.
Right.
And for me, like what was happening is I would either, like you were saying, I would drive over the front leaving. I would either slide back, or I would get over the front. And when they left, when they went to drop out, I had no strength with my arm. So I was coming off my rope, and it would slide my hips to the outside that first corner. And the Brazilian, he's like, you need to get strong. He said, just hold on to that rope hard and then leave and do exactly what you're doing. And really started experiencing what it's like for your hips to actually suck up underneath that rope.
Well, and if you think about it, it's your pivot point riding a bull is your knees. It's not your feet. Like if I'm playing basketball or football, my strength is in my feet, pushing into the ground and being strong with your knees bent, kind of being in that position. But you don't have that on a bull. Your feet aren't touching anything, so your knees are really the pivot point, and your knee needs to be in the bull's shoulder. It can't be, if it's dropped straight below your hip, you don't have a good way to get forward and not get top heavy and feel like you're fighting the front end. And so, my way of teaching is slide your feet forward, get your hips under you strong, and then mash your legs while they're still on the chute, and then pull your feet off while you're mashing and push down, and that just rolls everything into those shoulders. And so now your pivot point's in a strong place where you can, the initial move out there, you just get up there and then hold. And most of the time you got to hold for two jumps because most of them don't kick.
Yeah.
Even at the long round level at the PBR, they don't kick the first jump. They
Yeah.
kick the second jump. And if
Yeah.
you so if you're really worried about the front end, just get over the top of the shoulders and don't fight having to stay way forward. You just get on top here. I mean, it's like if I'm gonna engage with somebody blocking somebody in football, you know, I don't get way too forward. I just get strong over the top of my my foundation and let my structure have some control. And so it's it's easier to for hands on for me because you can't really describe it totally where it's understood. And then back to the stationary barrel. The thing I like about the stationary barrel, it affords you the ability to find that strong place over and over and over. On a drop barrel, you might get there, but you don't know.
Yeah.
But on a stationary barrel, you move forward and then find that place, and you can stay there for 3 or 4 or 12 seconds, however long you want to stay there, and know that you feel that you're strong all the way from the bottom of your chin all the way down to the bottom of your calves.
Yeah.
And so, that's why I'm kind of a stationary barrel advocate. And I've used Mighty Bucky, I've used the drop barrel, all that stuff, and I think they're good for timing, but in actuality, I think the stationary barrel gives you more. It gives you more benefit than you think it does. It's almost a little bit boring, but if you create scenarios in your head and stuff, and get yourself into your hand and get back, square level those shoulders back up, or get behind and level back up over the top of your core, then you know one place to get, and you just get there.
Yeah.
And I've never really talked to Jim Sharp about his way of thinking when but I watched him enough to know that that's all he thought about was just getting that one spot.
Yeah.
And free arm stuff was really the last thing he was thinking of.
Yeah, he didn't freaking. It was you watched Jim Sharp once, and you've watched him about every time.
Yeah, I mean honestly the most boring bull rider on the planet. So I tell guys, hey, try to be boring. Like let's be boring and win us a few gold buckles. But I just think that there's a lot of guys that got better pictures than Jim Sharp, but Jim Sharp's got 2 more gold buckles than almost everybody else in the world. So so I don't know. That's just my way of thinking.
What's up, everybody? I'm thrilled to announce a fantastic partnership between the Rodeo Wagon podcast and RodeoLife Official. RodeoLife isn't just a coffee brand, it's a veteran-owned business that epitomizes the principles of hard work, dedication, and perseverance in all their products. As an avid consumer of RodeoLife coffee, I am proud to align myself with a company that mirrors my values and resonates with our audience. Supporting this veteran-owned business is not only a testament to our shared ethos, but also a way to give back to those who have served our country. This partnership promises exciting content, collaborations, and surprises for all our listeners and the rodeo community. You can anticipate special episodes featuring the RodeoLife experts, and even a chance to win some RodeoLife merchandise. We look forward to this journey with RodeoLife and the enriching experience it will bring our audience. Join us as we venture into this partnership, fueled by a passion for rodeo and a great cup of RodeoLife coffee. Stay tuned for more exciting updates and the amazing things to come from the Rodeo Wagon podcast and RodeoLife Official. Make sure you go to rodeolifeofficial.com and check out all their sweet merch. Are you searching for that perfect statement? Look no further than Bluegrass Engraving, where creativity meets craftsmanship. Their specialty lies in creating custom buckles and dip cans, but that's not all. They redefine elegance with an exquisite line of jewelry, and for those who appreciate a little flair, check out their engraved guns collection. At Bluegrass Engraving, they don't just create products, they craft experiences. Visit Bluegrass Engraving today and let them turn your visions into engraved realities. Bluegrass Engraving, where artistry meets authenticity. Hey there, folks. I want to tell you about my favorite cowboy hat brand, Sombrero Brands. As a professional bull rider, I know how important it is to have a hat that not only looks good, but can withstand the toughest rides out there. And that's exactly what Sombrero Brands delivers. Their hats are custom fitted and shaped to perfection, with a level of attention to detail that's hard to find these days. But what really sets Sombrero Brands apart is the fact that they're a family-owned and operated business. Mark and Kendall Holler, the owners, and their daughter Sarah, who's only 13 but already a hat-making prodigy, are all passionate about their craft. They know what it takes to make a cowboy hat that can stand up to anything the rodeo circuit can throw at it. And get this, The founder's grandfather, Polly Holler, was born and raised at South Camp on the 4 Sixes Ranch. These folks have got cowboy blood running through their veins, and it shows in every hat they make. That's why I'm proud to have Sombrero Brands as a major sponsor for my podcast, the Rodeo Wagon Podcast. So if you're in the market for a hat that's tough enough to handle anything the rodeo throws at it, give Sombrero Brands a try. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Yeah, he did it, and he did it consistent too. Heck,
And
I
there's other guys. I just use Jim just because we're the same age. He came along a year after I did, and just totally dominated where
when
he
I
was at.
when I first started, I guess that kind of person would have been Cody Lostro. You know, when I first started, I watched Cody a lot, and he rode pretty much the same.
Yeah, yeah, just a lot like Mike White. There's you can start naming the guys. Clint Bronger's one that gets doesn't get remembered as much. He was great at that one thing, and
I watched Clint probably when I first started. I watched him away from my hand all the time. Like I watched away from his hand, and I freaking that's exactly if you watch me right away from my hand. When I first started, probably the first 4 years, that that was the person that I tried to mimic.
yeah, exactly. I mean
Obviously,
that's
it's not the same because body type and everything, but that was the person away from my hand I wanted to be like.
and everybody's got their own individual style and
Uh-huh.
some guys have strengths that the other guy doesn't and weaknesses, but the one thing that everybody that rode great did was they stayed down to the shoulders. They let the shoulders be everything. And I don't care who you're talking about. There's, even Michael Gaffney, who rode a little bit high, he was on top of their shoulders. He got back to that spot in a consistent manner. And so I just, the simplicity is what I go for, because if you give guys tools that they can fix something with, then they can fix it themselves and they don't have to come back to, which I don't care if a guy ever comes back to my school. If he takes what he got and it's the right stuff, then he's able to know what to do to get, get a slump taken care of or whatever. But anyway,
What it, I mean, heck, what's it, I know you see like obviously the riders from each generation. You've seen, about all of them. But really the bulls, like that, the breeding from back when you started to what it is now. What's your opinion on that? Because
well, that's
used to it, but
it's a loaded question, because you'll get some guys saying, "Oh yeah, them bulls are no different." They're different in the fact that the depth of the kind of bulls um, that we really desired to get on is so much deeper now. And I'm not saying that's those old guys say this generation's not as good as we were or what. I don't get into that. I think there's as much talent. There's more talent. There's a deeper pool of talent going right now than there was back in the day. Now there was probably more bull riders. You'd go to a bull riding and be 100 head bull riding, and you don't see those anymore. You don't see that many guys show up, but there was always guys there that weren't prepared, and the same's true today. There's always guys that show up that are not prepared, and that's the part that, to me, with the Cowboy Channel and you getting to watch every time, you can see there's a lot of guys that are definitely not prepared. And personally, for me, that you're just throwing money away, and instead of going and getting ready, getting prepared, so when you go, you see all these rodeos where they they might ride one or two bulls, and yeah, the bulls are way better in a quantity of good bulls, but those bulls that you see now that are like almost every bull out of the chute are the ones that we wanted back in the day. And you might get on 10 head before you got on that bull. And so you couldn't waste him. And so I think a lot of guys uh, they get to the place where they're making excuses for falling off. And hey, not nothing against this generation, because I got a lot of guys that I know that are really good, but um, it's the same old deal. It's just not making excuses and being prepared when you get there, taking advantage of that opportunity when you get there. And so I think it's just a little bit. Your generation has what we dreamed of in
Yeah,
having really good bulls and not having to get on a bunch of pieces of crap, which we did. We got on a lot of bulls they're go to the sale barn nowadays.
at the same
And
time, I think too, like, and this is probably me and Kyler. I just had him on. I think that podcast gets released today. Kyler Oliver, and we were talking about, uh, even right now, when you get to that high level and you get to the PBR championship round, and there's only so many guys even nowadays that want to get on those bulls.
yeah,
And I think there's a higher, maybe more higher level bulls, but there's still probably the same amount of bulls that are, really rank, and there's still only a select few that really want to get on those bulls every weekend. Now, for some guys, like, they'd love to get on a riding solo once so that they can tell that story, but how many guys want to get on him every weekend? I still think there's only so many that guys that really want that. Um,
yeah. And you know what? You can't talk somebody into wanting it, and that's doing all these schools. It's easy to see. It's easy to see after the first session of getting on who really wants to ride bulls. There's a
yeah,
lot of guys there that are there for whatever reason. It might be mom and dad paid for the school, or mom and dad wants it more than they do, or whatever. But you can always see the guys that are like, you're going, oh, that guy's got the goods now. He just needs to put it all together. And so it's bull riding. It's all cool to watch on TV and think that you want to be a bull rider. But what are you doing? What are you doing to get there? Are you getting on? Are you going to the practice pen and getting on 6 or 8 bulls that you have a chance to ride? And that's the part. Like I really talk to guys about being strategic about what bulls they get on to try to prepare for the weekend, because I hear well, how are they going to learn to ride rank bulls if they don't get on them? Well, they got to learn to ride. They got to learn to dominate easy bulls and mid-level bulls and good bulls before they start getting on rank bulls. And I mean, you test yourself a little bit, but I always go back to the foundation. It goes back to baseball. When they have when you're in batting practice, you don't try to hit a 95-mile-an-hour slider every time. You get your hand-eye coordination together by hitting slow pitches, and most of them are down the pike. And so, to me, I think, my personal story is I got on probably 2,500 head of steers as a kid, and the way the setup was, we had rope and shoot here and a buck and shoot here, and the strip and shoot was down 300 feet at the end of the arena. So what those steers do? They just went to the out gate, but they were flanked and they were jumping and kicking. And
yeah,
so I experienced dominating until I decided to get off for 3 summers at our place. We had a roping arena, and so they doubled his bucking steers, and I got on. The number 2,500 is not it's not a stupid number. It might be a little low, it might be a little high. I don't know. I might have got on more than that, but invariably I'll tell this story at a school, and I'll say, how many do you think I bucked off of? And I'll have some kid pop off and say 50%. I'm like, no. If I bucked off of 5%, I would be surprised. And it
yeah,
wasn't because I was great. It was because I was getting on the right kind. They had some belly rolls and some forward movement, and each steer was built a little different or had a little different something to him. But I got good at tracking the forward movement and this kind of stuff.
yep,
But there wasn't any spinning going on. There would one every once in a while would turn back and probably buck me off. I don't know. But my point is I got myself good at tracking the forward movement and a steer going away from me. So when I got on my first bull, I was totally prepared. I was scared crapless. I had my my nuts were in my throat type of deal. But there's no way that bull was going to buck me off because he was just a junior bull, and I rode him easily. And so my whole thought process behind that is, you take any other sport They don't put a sixth grader against a 12th grader.
Yeah.
They put sixth graders against sixth graders, and they move them up as they advance. Then they get to the point where they can handle. They go to college. They've stepped the steps, and so it. I I battle a little bit with um bull guys that want to take stuff to youth events, and when you're a grown man, whatever, it's you're gonna get in over your head sometimes. But I don't think kids should be in over their head. I think they should continually be in a position of dominating as they're developing physically, as they're developing mentally, and as they're building their heart to be a real bull rider down the road. Because who cares who the junior bull riding champ was last year,
What?
except for him and his family. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody's gonna know who the 2014 bull riding champ at the junior high finals was,
Yeah.
except for him and
Right.
or his buddy. There's going to be a small group, but nobody, that isn't the pinnacle of what you're trying to get to. So take those things. If you fail down there, keep working and go to the next place and gain something there. It's like going to amateur rodeos. Have yourself a game plan is my uh, advice always. And you know what? Stetson Wright was when he was little. I tried, I told him, I said, hey man, go rodeo or not Stetson Wright, sorry, Jess Lockwood.
Oh,
I
yeah.
told him, rodeo, go rodeo. I told him that, go rodeo. And he's PBR determined. Now he rodeoed when he was 15, 14, 15, 16 at these amateur rodeos in Montana. So he actually did what I was telling him to. But I just wanted him not to. He's a little guy and small framed and not fully developed yet. Guess what? He went and proved me wrong. you know, because he was that determined. And he's a badass, and he had a work ethic and all that stuff. But he's one in a million. There's not those kind of guys on every street corner. And so there's a lot of guys that got to work through the process to get to a place where they're on a great level. And so, I hey, good for Jess, man. That guy was something to watch. Like there's no, I went back and watched some of his highlight videos from a couple years he won the world, and there was nobody better at getting straight forward and stopping. He had a little more free arm movement than I would have liked, but that's his style. But he was great at getting back to the front end that one place. And you talk about like Stetson Wrights like that, and there's tons of guys like that. I'm not just picking those guys out, but the reason I even start talking about Lockwood is because I tried to advise him when he was young to go rodeo, go rodeo, go rodeo, and he went PBR and won the world. But how many other guys came on the PBR scene and were a big deal and you never heard of it? They were a bottom feeder their whole career because they didn't allow themselves to go develop physically, mentally, and come to the PBR prepared for what they were going to face, because the PBR is a different grind than rodeoing, or it's facing great bulls every single time. And so, and not to knock anybody, I don't, I could start naming guys that I feel like left something on the table by not going and rodeoing and are in the PBR, and they're good guys, or but and I'm not going to do that because I mean, that'd just be me being an old, you know, this head trying to knock somebody down. That's not. I've never been that guy. I've never told anybody you suck. I don't. You know what I'm saying? I don't. I try to be an encouraging guy, and I'm always lifting guys up and trying to help them get to their place. Now, if I need to tell a guy, hey, you know what? You need to go rodeo for a couple of years and grow up a little bit and figure this stuff out so that when you get to PBR, you're not getting your ass handed to you every week. And
Yeah.
so, and I'm a guy that's kind of, I don't give my advice outside of uh, having permission, because guys that I have some kind of relationship with, or I've spent time talking to, or they've asked for advice. Cody Jesus is a perfect example. We talk a lot, and he, I feel like I've been able to help some of his stuff, and in the end, it's not me that's made anybody. I'm a small piece of the puzzle, but I like to keep being a piece of the puzzle and being having influence in guys' lives, and this bull riding deal, it goes away before you want it to,
Yeah.
most guys, and you see there's very few guys that quit on their own terms, really, and
Yeah. Well, heck, even injury, I mean,
yeah,
we don't take an off season. Every time I've taken a break, it's because I've been forced to take a break. Sometimes it's been my own fault. There's been, now I realize, heck, there's a time, when you're grinding so hard that you really are burnt out and you need to take a couple weeks. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting hurt. And, there's been a few times where I probably got hurt because physically, I'd been going so hard.
well, and there's times you got to fight through it. You got to, this is a cowboy sport, but there's also a long term plan that needs to be in place. And if you got to take a few weeks off to get right, by trying to ride injured, sometimes guys get hurt in a different, they hurt something else trying to, and they know in the heart of their hearts that they're not really ready. They need to go take time off, and they don't do it. And so,
And it's super. It depends on the context. Heck, there's been
yeah.
times where you should grind through it, and then there's times like I remember my knee was shot, and Tandy was telling me to get surgery, and finally it took Matt Triplett coming up to me and saying, "Dude, you're never gonna ride to your potential until you get that knee fixed."
Yeah. Well, and that's the hard thing of being, having some patience, but you got to sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes you just got to do what you're told and do it the best of, take the best advice. But I mean, I can talk about times when I didn't take Tandy's advice and it worked out, and times I didn't take his advice and it didn't work out. So there's times you got to damn sure cowboy up and go at it. But there's also times you got to step back and just give yourself a little bit and be, because confidence is king. If you have confidence, even if you're battling an injury or whatever, you can ride through it. But if you have no confidence, even if you're 100% healthy, you're leaving something. You've left something on the table, and so
I
that's
think
why I
what
continue.
you
I
what you
tell guys to continually get on stock that they know they can ride in the practice pen, so that when they walk away, they're walking into the weekend with their shoulders pulled back and going, "Okay, I'm fixing to go slay some," rather than going, "God, I hope I don't draw number 18 or whatever, whatever the scary one is or whatever."
the skill development, and I don't know why in this sport it's not the biggest thing in the world, but you look at like baseball. And like, you tell me how many rookies are under the age of 24 years old? There's not that many. I mean, there's not too many guys that get into the MLB. There's guys that are talented, freaking they're oozing with talent, and they have hunger and they have drive, and they're still 25 years old before they get into the big leagues.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been asked why the Brazilians do so well, and that's part of the answer, because very few of them come over here as an 18-year-old kid.
yeah.
Most of them are 20 something when they get here, okay? The other thing is they've lived in poverty, a lot of them. They know what true poverty is. America, we don't know what poverty is. My I can't get Wi-Fi is a problem over here. And so, and not being mean or anything, but if you're a guy that wants to ride bulls, and you're wherever you're from Brazil, you from Australia, you from America, whatever. If your work ethic doesn't outdo your talent level, you're done. You got talent level and work ethic. If my work ethic stays here, my talent level drops. If my work ethic goes here, my talent level rises. And so I don't care who you are. If you don't work, if you don't put the work in, it don't matter. And some guys are going to have more talent, and it's going to become easy. It's going to come a little bit easier for them. But I know lots of guys that didn't have the talent as the guy that was kicking their butt every weekend, and their household names, and the guys that were kicking their butt didn't have any work ethic, and nobody's ever heard of them.
Well, and I think
So
some of that, heck, that Brazilian that just won the world last year. He's in his 30s, comes over, wins rookie of the year, wins the world. But when I started, and I know, look, I get it from a business side of things, like the PBR, the young, it's not just PBR, it's MLB, it's NFL, it's all of these businesses that can make money off of really highlighting the young guys coming in, these
Yeah.
next super. But the unfortunate part is, like for me, I was 18 years old when I came in, and I all I knew about anything was I watched PBR, right? So I was watching these guys on TV. Well, at
Yeah.
18, I thought, hey, I'm behind. Like I don't have time to go through what I know my baseball background tells me I need to do. Like there's a
Yeah.
process. But I thought, heck, I'm so far behind right now. I'm going to be forced to jump into this thing like immediately. And
Yeah.
I did so, and it hasn't been the worst thing in the world for me, but I've certainly seen the downside of that over the years. If I would have taken the first 4 years and said, look, you have 5 or 6 years here to develop this slowly. I don't need
Right.
to enter PBRs when I've been riding bulls for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how old are you now?
I'm 29.
29. So that 29 years old is not really, it's not that old if you go through the process. And that's, to me, I think a lot of guys get old young because they get slayed too much quickly. And you're gonna face injuries. I don't care who you are. You're gonna face some sort of injuries riding bulls. It's a known fact. But the longer you can the longer you can not put yourself in that position before you become a real man, and 18, there's a few guys, but most guys at 18 physically and mentally they're not grown men. They're still kids, and so that's always been my advice. And the PBR, I whatever, I don't think they have that mentality of trying to, they don't have a good feeder program
Yeah.
in my mind. They don't have and for whatever reason, I think, I think the PRCA and amateur rodeos and these bull team events where you get on some bulls that are a little more geared towards rider, that's the feeder program. But there's nobody controlling that, and there's nobody saying, hey, you're fixing to go to the big leagues, or you got to stay back here for a minute. Let's work on this. And so maybe this team's deal is going to be a little bit of help to that if they do it right. I don't know anything about it. I'm friends with Michael Gaffney and I mean, I spend time talking. I'm friends with all those guys, are
Yeah,
coaches,
yeah.
but Mike's the one I've talked to the most, and a little bit of Ross Coleman. I don't know what those guys' ideas are. It would do well for the PBR, for those team owners to start a really good, some sort of feeder program. I don't know what that is, and I'm not a guy that has any answers. I'm just saying they there's too many guys that show up unprepared for what they're fixing to get into. And
I think that I think they'll be forced to with the team stuff. I think the first year they found it out, because I don't know if you remember, and again, I'm not going to name names, but that first year there was a lot of guys that were drafted that were young, and me and Keith were talking about it, and there was at least probably 4 of them, 3 or 4 of them, where we said these they didn't scout these guys enough. Like these kids are about to get introduced to something that they don't know how to handle yet.
yeah, and I don't knock anybody. Brady Turgeon and I are pretty good friends. I've known him. He's been to some of my schools. He got in over his head without knowing it, and he made the PBR finals because he rode a couple of bulls that really fit his style, or a handful of bulls that really fit his style. But those ones with some change up and all that stuff, he wasn't quite prepared for that. And I don't. It's not to knock him. He just, hell, he's going to go where he's going to go to the. If your idea is not to get to the top level, then you're probably in the wrong business. But there's a process of doing it. And now Brady, he's struggling with some injuries and stuff like that. And to go rodeo for a couple of years and grow up a little bit, get some strength, and he's still a skinny little guy. He's probably stronger than I am now, but but you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a kid that, and we're friends. That's the only reason I use his name, because we've kind of had a little discussion about it. But he's a good kid and he's got talent and stuff, but he just wasn't really prepared for what was ahead of him. And it's, it's easy to, let me rephrase that. It's not easy to get to the PBR, to get into where you're getting into the UTBs is not as difficult as it should be, in my mind.
I'm with you.
Guys that get there because of injuries, because of, they do well at some of the lower end deals, and then they get drafted, they get pulled up or whatever, and they just aren't ready for it. And so there's got to be a way for that to be changed, but which I'm not the one to say it. I think the team's deal, I personally think the team's deal should have dumbed the bulls down a little bit and let the superstars get on a bunch of practice bulls and let these 18-year-old kids that nobody ever heard of come in and compete with their heroes and have a good chance. There's a lot of them that didn't have, they were in over their head and they didn't know it. And
Yeah.
like you said, they didn't vet them enough to know where they'd been or what they'd done. And
Well, and some
you know,
of it too.
hey, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback. I can sit here as a guy from the outside and watching and road bulls and how I might do it or whatever. None of my business. It's really none of my business. Nobody's asked me, so I'm not. My opinion doesn't mean anything. But that just, if it was me doing it, I would take care of those guys that could be
Yeah.
superstars in 7 or 8 or 10 years. I'd take care of them boys. But it doesn't seem to me like that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Heck, the hardest part about when you get into like the team stuff, because I love so much of it. Like I think there's opportunities within that structure that's great. The downside is you know my agent Vinny, he played pro ball, and you get into those big sports leagues and it's cutthroat. I mean, you're just riders don't matter at that point, just like in baseball, the baseball players don't matter. And you don't see that because what you see is you see the guys that made it that are,
Right.
the
Right.
stars, but you don't see the countless of young kids that kind of get, thrown to the wayside, and in this sport, that could be a guy's life, that could be his entire
Yeah.
career very quickly if you get hurt a lot.
Well, they got a show to put on, so that's what that's where their focus is, which is right. But to me, I just like to see some kind of organized, legitimate feeder program to really help these guys get there.
Yeah,
And I don't know what that is. If I was a team coach, I'd have my way of doing it, and I'm not, so that doesn't matter. It's none of my business.
I think though, I think if the plan is to grow the team part, whether they're thinking that now, you almost are going to be forced to do that. Because if you want to have as many bull riders as they want to have, and they've talked about having, last year they were talking to us, or earlier this year, they were talking to us about doing a minor league teams and stuff like that. And like all of that's great, but like how are you going to prepare guys to come to these? Because I've been to UTBs where they brought on Billings, Montana. They took 45 guys, and the championship day was a 3-day event. The last day, 22 bull riders got on. You're telling me that at the highest level, you killed off that many of some of the toughest individuals doing it. What are
Yeah.
you going to do for the next level to where you can prevent that from happening? And that's something that's going to have to be addressed. If this is the thing though, if you still want to have the best bulls in the world versus the best guys.
They had a little team, like a coaches deal a couple weeks ago, which I wasn't officially invited to. I got told about it a couple days beforehand, so I didn't. They were wanting guys that were doing schools and stuff like that to show up. I had other stuff planned, so I didn't show up, but which I didn't get a legitimate invitation anyway, so it didn't matter. But um, that's part of the stuff that I don't know if that got discussed there, but that would have been a good subject to be, to go into and talk about how they're gonna prepare the next set of guys coming in to really be the real deal. So
I I mean I think too, like you were saying, I don't know. I think one thing that's not helpful with the skill development is some of these freaking mini bulls and stuff that some of these kids are getting on. I mean, holy crap, Cody. Some of these mini bulls are bucking like that for his size. Some of these kids, for their size and the size of that mini bull, they just went 93 points all day long. But physically, that's the question. They could have all the talent in the world, but
Oh,
physically, what are
exactly.
they doing to kids?
I've not been a mini bull fan. Whatever. It's actually a kind of a cool, you know, thing for, kind of a showcase type deal. But I think in my opinion is there's too many bulls that don't buck and too many bulls that do buck. There's that middle ground. There's not that help them boys that have some up and down and have a little bit of timing. They either haul ass and yank them kids, or they buck way too hard for the kid to even be prepared for what's fixing to happen. So I've not been a big, and it goes back to me getting on 2,500 head of roping steers. I learned how to ride. I There's a lot of them kids that go to these mini bull deals. They're never going to learn how to ride, and then they're going to be thrown in the fire, getting on real bucking bulls, and not even know what they're doing right or wrong.
What about horses? Did you get on a lot of horses and
Just you talking about bucking horses or just riding horseback?
riding horses? Different.
Yeah, I rode horses from the time I went on my first roundup when I was 4 years old.
I
Never
think,
had a never had a kid's saddle. I was always riding my dad's or my grandpa's saddle, or riding bareback. So I did a lot of that, and I think that's beneficial. I believe that was part of my process of being, getting where I could ride good, and so it's kind of built into me to hang on with my legs and learn how to adjust my body and stuff. And so at all my schools, I tell them, hey, if you have access to riding, horse bareback, do it a lot.
I found which surprised me because I wasn't involved in rodeo, but I rode horses a lot, and trained colts and stuff. And I was shocked by how many bull riders don't even get on horses.
No, they don't. And I'm an advocate of riding bareback horses and broncs too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I,
because it just gives you, I don't know, it just makes you understand how to think like an animal, and
yeah,
I don't know, keep your feet moving, and
getting on bucking animals. I mean, there's got to be some.
yeah,
I've
exactly.
never been on ones other than colts and horses, but I
Yeah.
never been in a rodeo event.
Yeah, I rode a lot of bareback horses and broncs, and more bareback horses than I did broncs, but um shucks, I don't think it's a bad thing for guys to do that, It, I think it'll help.
Yeah, heck, it worked for Dalen. Dalen
Yeah,
swearing.
yeah,
That's
he
right.
ride bareback horses or broncs. And Ross Coleman was the same way. He rode bareback horses, and Justin McBride. Those two guys. First time I saw them, they were at college. They went to school at UNLV, and I was judging a college rodeo that they were at, and they were both bareback riding son of a bucks, and their bull riding was not overly impressive. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It didn't stand out compared to their bareback riding. Those guys could ride, and I think McBride might even won the national title in high school in bareback riding.
Really?
I think I heard that. I don't know if that's true, but Ross Coleman could have gone to the NFR riding bareback horses, but he chose PBR, and
Yeah, I didn't know that. Shane Proctor, he did. Uh,
so,
what does he
saddle.
do? Saddle bronc? Yeah,
He probably rode bareback horses too, knowing him. He
yeah,
tough
probably.
guy, but yeah,
There
there's a
was
lot of guys.
there more
Dan
of that.
Mortensen. Dan Mortensen was a bull rider before he was a bareback or a saddle bronc rider.
Was there more of that back in the day than
Yeah,
nowadays? Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot. Like Jim Sharp got on broncs, and I think Clint Bronger did. I know, Tough and Cody Lambert, and like we all like we all entered the bronc riding at Helotes, Texas one time because they were giving an all around trailer, so we're all trying to win the trailer. But yeah, the David Fournier rode broncs pretty good, and I mean there's a lot of guys that rode multiple events, and it's different now. More guys are focused on bull riding, which is fine. I mean, it'd be like trying to play every sport. You take the one that you excel at and spend more time there, then it's gonna probably benefit you.
But I think that for a little bit, there was so much more money in bull riding than everything else, but that's starting to change a little bit. I mean, that's one thing that I've started noticing is the sport of rodeo is growing as
Oh
far as
yeah,
each discipline, not just bull riding, but these other disciplines are starting to, grow and the contestants getting paid like they should, which is
right.
cool to see.
Yeah, it's exciting to watch, man. I'm a big rodeo fan. I love every event, and I've done nearly every event. I've never jumped off a horse on a steer, but I threw a bunch of them when I was a kid. But I love every event in the sport. It's kind of exciting.
Uh, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the gold buckle printing. So tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing with the gold buckle printing.
Yeah, so I got involved with this company that they got a printer that can print color, and so I just started selling for them. I was selling rodeo back numbers and stuff like that, and then I ended up buying into the company, so I'm one of the owners now, and we got um well, Denver, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston. We're not doing Houston this year, but we did last year. Believe we have the American this year. We've done Cheyenne for 3 years, and I mean, there's all kinds of rodeos. I could start naming a bunch of them, but we do a lot of stuff on leather. All these leather back numbers that you see on TV, those are ours.
Well,
And
heck, I
really
saw I saw MRCA. You did one for MRCA, and so
good. Yep.
MRCA the last 2 years when I've came back from injury, I've went and rode. You're talking about riding a high percentage. I would go to those little deals, and I would ride 90% of my bulls.
Yeah.
Going to those MRCAs. That'd be anywhere from 72 to 88, but mostly right around 80 points is what you're getting on.
Yeah.
And so I saw that and I thought that was funny because the last 2 years I won MRCA, won a saddle and all of
Sweet.
that. But
So you got a couple of them back numbers yourself, huh?
yep. So
Those, I mean, they're like something you'll
yeah.
hang on the wall and that kind of stuff. It's like back in the day, really maybe Houston and Cheyenne, and I I don't know that I even have a Pendleton back number, but I got NFR, but was the one you kept, and maybe the Dodge Circuit Finals and stuff like that. But there wasn't a whole lot back in the day that people keep, and now there's everybody's got something that shows, hey,
Yeah.
I went to Fort Worth, and Fort Worth customizes theirs and puts contestant names on there and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool, and I'm excited to like all those rodeos that I got to ride at that were I'm I've got, I guess, part of the reason that we're doing well is just my relationship with committee people and stuff like that over the years. So I've got some inside contacts that are help me that way. Frank Thompson's a steer wrestler that's a good friend of mine, and he's part of the committee there at Cheyenne, and he's the one I called. That was the first big rodeo I got, was Cheyenne, and I called Frank, and he said, "Well, let me give this guy's number." And we had a sample in their hands 2 days after I talked to them, and we got the order. So we've been doing it. We've done it 3 years in a row. So pretty exciting, pretty good
Yeah.
stuff. We
Yeah.
actually did Canadian. We did the Canadian finals this year.
Oh,
That's
did
really
you? That's cool.
yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Gold Buckle Printing is the name of the company, and it's just we're on Instagram, Facebook, and we got website goldbuckleprinting.com. So we can do banners, we do custom keychains, we do hat stickers, we do all kinds of cool stuff, vest stickers.
Stuff like that.
Yep, pretty exciting, pretty cool business.
How does it work like design? Like, does the person that's ordering kind of send you like a digital image and you kind of,
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we've got graphic designers there working for us, so we've done some, but most of the time people pretty much know what they want and kind of have it laid out how they want it for us. So, but
I,
yeah,
I definitely like that because, man, you get a bunch of them freaking back numbers that are paper and they're cool and all, but they freaking wrinkle up and they tear and it's kind of cool to have something.
and they disappear like heck. I don't know where I kept some, but I don't even know where they're at.
And you don't
I,
know where you got them from after you got 50 of them,
yeah,
unless they say where it's at.
exactly. Yeah, so it's a good business. It's growing. We're doing good. We're excited. I'm going up to the NFR this year spend time at the convention, just talk to rodeo committees, and we're getting into the wedding venue stuff now, like Western weddings and stuff like that. So we got a lot of stuff going. It's kind of a cool deal.
Yeah, that is cool.
Thanks for
Before I let you go, what's your schedule like for schooling? Like, are you doing that throughout the year? How often are you putting on schools as well for the kids?
Yeah, so this year to date, I've done 24 schools and I've got 3 left to the end of the year. So that'd be 27 this year. And right now I've got probably 12 of them scheduled for the new year. And my Instagram, my Facebook, I always post my updated schedule on there. So I don't have a website myself for my schools, but I do have a Cody Custer Rodeo or Bull Riding Clinic page on both Instagram and Facebook, and then my personal same thing. I kind of keep that updated as much as I can. So I got quite a few of them coming up in January, February, March. So pretty exciting. I like doing it. I like working with guys and just heck, I learned something about every school. I learned something else about how to be a better coach and teach people, the right stuff. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is, man. And I know, like, coming up in, my career, I haven't been to any of your schools, but I've paid pretty close attention to what I've seen on Facebook and stuff on your teaching and just talking to my buddies and stuff. And, I
Yeah.
remember even this last year when I was struggling and Keith Hall told me, he's like, you need to get a hold of Cody.
Yeah.
And that was about the time when the Brazilians really kind of started helping me out. And it's even, just listening to you talk, it's funny, like, you're never too old to learn. And, you know, like you were saying, I'm 29 and I feel like I'm nowhere near, the prime of my career yet. I still got, I've learned a lot and taken that next step, but I
Well,
think,
there's a benefit that you kind of have as at starting at 18. Your body was preserved at a young age, and so you don't have injuries going into your adulthood. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? You didn't come into your adulthood with some injuries. There's a lot of kids that got bad elbows by the time they're 16 or whatever. So you do have a benefit in that where your career is gonna go longer age wise
yeah.
than some.
You say that, and that's interesting because, like, I've had a lot of, like, injuries and a lot of, but nothing chronic. Like, I've had the surgeries, but once they were fixed, I didn't have issues with them again.
Yeah.
And so that
Well,
probably
that's a benefit. So really, you weren't behind the game. You know what I'm saying? You probably were. You're probably in a good spot, really. And if you're a guy that, which I can tell just by talking to you and your demeanor and all that stuff, you're a go-getter. You're going to keep working at it and trying and, you know, learning new things and putting all that stuff into use. So that says as much as anything for a guy how their career is going to go.
yeah, 100%. But I mean, heck, definitely the youth coming up, man, they need all the help that they can get because the ABBI and the breeding programs, there's not gonna become less ranked bulls in the next.
No, no, they can't hardly buck any harder than some of those guys do. My gosh, crazy.
Yeah, it's like Tyler Maynor. We were at the UTB in Sacramento, and it was his first event, and he got into the championship round, and he's like, "I want the buckiest bull in here." And Cooper Davis walked up to him and said, "Bud, they all buck."
Coming from the champ.
So yeah, but heck yeah. Well, thanks for being on here. I know a bunch of guys have been asking. I've been hurt. I've been framing houses for one of my buddies, and there's a couple ex-Amish boys that started riding bulls, and they've been waiting for me to do a podcast with you. So I'll appreciate it.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's fun talking about bull riding and life and all that. So
Heck yeah.
I
Well,
love it. Appreciate you having me.
we'll definitely do it again sometime. Maybe next time you can do it in the wagon. It's where I live on the road. We're doing it all in here.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I appreciate you having me, buddy.
heck yeah. We'll see you later.
God bless you, man.